Hi guys, this example is looking at file attributes. So for example, when the file was created, the time it was created, or when it was last modified, or if the file, if it's actually is a file or is a directory, and then looking at permissions, if you can execute it or read or write. They'd be typical on a Unix system, but we'll just have a look at that here. The first example here is just to take a look at the older way of doing things using the file class, and then down below we'll look at the path using the path and the files class. So firstly, here's a reference to a file. It doesn't exist, so test.txt, and then to create it using that file reference, file.createNewFile. So when you have a reference to a file type, you can get there one of the attributes last modified. So bit of a pain with that is it gives out along the number of milliseconds since January 1st, 1970. So to turn that long into something that's a little bit more recognizable, you can pass that value, so file.lastModified, into the method of epoch milli, I might pronounce that wrong, and that returns an instant. So an instant is similar to your zoned date time or a date time. So when you print that out, you do get your year, month, day, followed by their T, followed by the time. Now, so what I'm going to do is just show you how to change that last modified. So if you've just created a file but want to make it look like it was created ages ago, you can write some Java code to do that. So what I've created here is a zoned date time. So I'm creating basically a year ago from today. So zoned date time now dot minus years. So I'm taking just 1 year off today's date and time. Now here, so I have the reference to the file that I've created, set last modified, and there that requires set last modified. The time, I'm just going to go into that class actually just to show you. So that's the file. And I'm not in the right package here, so just wait, let me go around a little bit, find the file class. Set last modified is what I'm looking for. So file set last modified. So okay, so a bit of a pain as well. It takes a long data type. So back here. Set last modified. So when you have that last year, so that's a zone date time, to epoch, I know I'm pronouncing that wrong, so apologies, second, that will turn it into a long. So it's a little bit of a pain the old way, because you have last modified will give you a long, and to set last modified you also need to pass in a long. And my printout here, I'm just using the instant method there to turn that long again into something that we can actually read. I did not copy and paste that correctly, so that should be, look, oh, a year ago, 2020, apologies. Oh, there we go. Now it looks a bit better. Now clean up there and just deleting the file. Okay, so that was the old way of doing things with the file class. And now the newer way, using the path. Okay, so the newer way they're using a path. So paths.get, again, pass in, a reference to a directory or a file. I'm using the new way there, files, so that you class with all the static methods, to create that file for me. And then when I have that path created, or that file created, you can use the static method in the files class, get last modified time, and you pass in the path. The advantage of this one is it actually gives you, a year and a time there as opposed to a long. And then to set the last modified time, this one is a little bit more difficult. You pass in the path, so the link to the file that you want to change the time of, and it requires a file time type, which is new. But the file time class there has in it a from method, and you can pass in there an instant. So last year is zone date time to instant. We'll convert that into an instant. The from method will convert the instant into the file time, which will allow you to change there the last modified time. Not the most easiest, is it? Now, files that get last modified time, so just print it back out there. Now, file permissions here. File permissions, these are typical of a Unix system. So when you have a file in Unix, you can, like you would from a DOS window, I don't have PowerShell open here, sorry. When you do a directory listing, you can see like R, W, and X for read, write, and execute permissions. So as a typical on a Unix system. So files.isExecutable, like if it's an exe file, that would print back there if the file was executable, if it's readable, and if it's writable. Now I see my file here is executable, so I suppose you could give it a go to execute it. Can it be readable and can it be writable? Yeah. So if it was read only, then perhaps the writable there would be false. Now, so we're looking at another way here of getting file attributes. So this way is I know the first way was tricky enough, but this is probably a little bit trickier. So there is an interface called basic file attributes, and there are two classes that implement that. So POSIX file attributes and DOS file attributes. Now I hope I pronounced that right as well. So the basic file attributes class, or the basic file attributes, we'll see down below, we can actually use a kind of an instance of that, I'll explain below, that gives you all the file attributes common across all file systems. Whereas the other two, the POSIX file attributes, that will give you attributes that are common to Unix and Linux. We can't use that code here, it won't work on Windows, but I'll show you what it would look like. And then the DOS file attributes, which will give you attributes that are common to the Windows system. So this is an interface, so how do you use it? Right hand side of the equals here, the files class has a static method there called read attributes. So it'll read the attributes for the file that you want. That path there, that's created up near the top. Oh, sorry, here. Again, it's just to a file that I made up there, test.txt. So I'm reading the attributes for that file that I've created. Now, the second parameter that you pass in here into the read attributes method, I'm just going to highlight that because I have it below there as well. Basic file attributes.class, that will give me back a class type, basically, that is a class that implements that interface. Now, I've no way of knowing exactly what that class is. Maybe there's one in the API somewhere. Maybe it's called Windows file attributes. I don't know the class that will give back. But that gives back a class type that will be a class that implements that basic file attributes. That's tricky to understand. I'm going to show you the one here below. If I want to get the attributes just common to Windows, I'd need, I'm going to read attributes, the DOS file, again, it could be the path that I have there above. And this time it's DOS file attributes.class. So that will give me back a class type, or a class that implements the basic file attributes, but this time the class will be a DOS file attributes class. And below, this is the code I can't run because I'm not on a Unix system. That's POSIX file attributes.class. So .class gives you back the class type for that. Sorry, I paused the recording there for a second just to get a better explanation. So POSIX files.class, it gives back an object that represents that class. So this is going to be code that somebody else has written. The DOS file attributes.class, that will give back an object that represents, or that is that type of class. So again, it's code that's written in the API, but it will give you back the correct object that is an implementation of that class. Now, so back up here, the basic file attributes. Once you've written that line of code to give you the basic file attributes, you've got a basic type, then you can get the creation time, the last modified time, or last access time, last modified time, and whether it is a directory or not. There's also a method called there, is regular file. Check if it's a directory or a file. Again, just moving down, if you're working with the DOS file attributes, again, I've just created a file there to work with. Changing some of the attributes. So static method there in the files class, set attribute, on my DOS file that I've created, so it works on Windows. So hidden, some files are hidden and you can't see them. You'd have to change the settings to see them. So I've said make it hidden, so true that it's hidden, and read only, make it true that it's read only. So just to show you how to get the two of those back. So create a reference to a DOS file attributes call it static method, files.read attributes, send in the file you want to get the attributes of, and then again DOS file attributes.class will give you back an object that is a DOS file attributes type. So again, that's done in the background. When you have that, you can get there, is it hidden? And in this example it's true because written code just changed the attribute and is read-only. And then just an example underneath just to change them back there, set attributes, change hidden back to false, change read only back to false. Again, is getting the attributes again, so you'd have to kind of reload the attributes if any of them are changed to get them again, and this time is hidden and read only there would print out false. Last little bit here, the POSIX file attributes. If I uncomment these, I'm just going to run this code as well just to show you that these they don't actually work. So unsupported operation exception. So you can't actually ask for the basically Unix. You can't get a POSIX file attributes object here because it's not applicable on Windows. So that's why you can't run that code. But that's what it would look like. And then you get all the permissions, a set, which is a collection of all the permissions on a file from string. That RW and dash, that's read, write, execute. Again, the next three will be read, write, execute. The last three will be read, write, execute. So it's getting the permissions there. There are three sets of them. There's one for the actual owner of the file, one for the group that the user is in, because in a Unix system everybody's in a kind of group of users, like you guys would be in software developer group, and then there's one set of permissions there for anybody else who isn't the owner and isn't within a particular group. Again, you could, so that's just creating a set of permissions. This is read write for the user, read for anyone in the group, and read for anybody outside of the group. And it's using that collection of permissions there, passing into this set file permissions. And that's it, but I comment those out because they don't work on Windows. And just clean up there at the end. There's a table there of the attributes on page 287 of your book. So have a little look in that. Just bear in mind there are 3 rows in that table, and the middle one looks at the POSIX of the Unix attributes, and they of course won't work on a Windows system. But basically the example in the book is kind of what's covered here in the file. So that's your file attributes there on Windows and Unix.